the world witnessed a remarkable turning point in international trade when India proudly announced a groundbreaking $14 billion partnership with the West African nation of Burkina Faso. This deal, focused on the import of premium maize and sorghum, wasn't just another trade agreement. It was a landmark moment that reshaped perceptions of agriculture, food security, and global cooperation. Guided by the leadership of President Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso stepped onto the global stage with bold confidence. For India, this agreement meant more than buying grain. It was about securing long-term stability in food supply. And for Burkina Faso, it was about opening new markets, attracting investments, and proving that the country could be a reliable agricultural powerhouse. Beyond the exchange of crops, India also committed to sharing advanced farming technologies and offering training programs, ensuring that the partnership would support sustainable growth, knowledge transfer, and prosperity for both nations. But to understand the magnitude of this deal, let us revisit the moment it was first announced. It was early morning when the headline broke. The global commodity markets were still quiet, but that silence didn't last long. By the time the sun rose higher, one single piece of news had rattled trading floors from Mumbai to New York. Burkina Faso signs $14 billion maize and sorghum export deal with India. Cut to stock footage of trading floors with rising tension. Traders on phones, screens flashing green and red. In less than an hour, grain futures shot upward. Television anchors interrupted regular programming, pulling in agricultural experts for live commentary. Rival exporters in South America and Eastern Europe were caught off guard, immediately reaching out to their trade ministers for emergency consultations. For many, this announcement seemed to come out of thin air. A landlocked West African nation suddenly outmaneuvering established agricultural giants. It felt improbable, but this wasn't a surprise for those who had been watching closely. This was no impulsive handshake deal. It was the outcome of years of meticulous planning, carefully built trust, and a strategic vision. Show newspaper headlines spinning onto screen. Burkina Faso breaks into global grain trade. To truly grasp how Burkina Faso, a nation without a coastline and with limited historical presence in the global grain market, secured one of the most significant agricultural deals in modern times. We must go back to the quiet, almost invisible beginnings of this unexpected partnership. The press release itself was understated. Just 3 short paragraphs. No flashy marketing, no grandiose slogans, only the essentials. The deal: 20 million metric tons of maize and sorghum. The timeline of 10 years. The value of $14 billion. The beer from India: 20 million metric tons for 10 years, and $14 billion in India. For most of the world, Burkina Faso was better known for its gold mines, cotton fields, and political struggles. Agriculture on such a massive export scale had never been associated with its name. Yet overnight, the country was thrust onto the global economic stage, leapfrogging some of the most established players in agriculture. Naturally, questions poured in. Why would India, a country that already produces vast amounts of grain, reach across continents to source supplies? And equally important, how could Burkina Faso, with less farmland and far fewer resources, possibly deliver on such an ambitious promise? The answers were not written in the official press release. Instead, they unfolded slowly through background briefings, insider reports, and discussions among policymakers. And as the story came into focus, one truth emerged: this was about far more than grain. It was about logistics, politics, climate strategy, and a changing world order. The origins of this historic agreement can be traced back 3 years earlier, during a series of discreet trade missions. While headlines at the time were dominated by larger nations making splashy announcements, Burkina Faso's leadership was working quietly but deliberately. At international summits, away from cameras and microphones, their representatives introduced the idea of Burkina Faso as a potential agricultural supplier. India was a natural target, with a rapidly growing population, unpredictable climate patterns, and increasing concerns about food security. Indian policymakers were already looking for ways to diversify their grain sources. They wanted suppliers who could provide consistency and avoid the risks of relying too heavily on a single region. The first conversations were almost accidental a chance discussion at a food security forum, followed by low-profile visits from Indian trade envoys to Burkina Faso's fertile Central Plains. These early talks weren't about money or flashy investments. They focused on basics, capacity, quality standards, reliability, and long-term trust. As trust developed, the scale of discussions grew. By the second year, Indian analysts began running detailed models. They found that even moderate imports from Africa could help stabilize prices in India, especially during poor monsoon years. But a major challenge loomed: transportation. Burkina Faso is landlocked. Transporting millions of tons of grain across borders, onto ports, and across oceans was no small feat. The solution came when India and Burkina Faso agreed to co-invest in critical infrastructure. This included upgrading regional rail connections, expanding storage facilities in nearby coastal countries, and streamlining shipping logistics. Cut to animated sequence: trains moving across West Africa, cargo ships sailing eastward toward India. Once the transportation question was resolved, the framework for the $14 billion deal quickly came together. But India's motivation was not only logistical, it was deeply strategic. On paper, India produces massive volumes of maize, sorghum, and wheat, yet the balance between domestic consumption and production is fragile. In years of plenty, surpluses rot in warehouses due to insufficient storage. But in years of weak rainfall, imports surge, prices climb, and political unrest brews. Burkina Faso offered something India couldn't always count on: climate diversity. Indian agriculture depends on the monsoon climate pattern that is increasingly unpredictable. Burkina Faso, however, has a different rainfall cycle. That meant a poor harvest in India would not necessarily align with one in West Africa, creating a natural hedge against risk. In heavy-footage Indian monsoon rains, then contrast with clear skies over African fields. There was also global competition to consider. China and several Middle Eastern nations had already been locking in long-term agricultural contracts across Africa. India knew it could not afford to wait while others secured supply lines. By signing a 10-year contract, India effectively future-proofed a portion of its food supply. And because sorghum is vital, not only for direct consumption but also as livestock feed, the deal provided security not just for people but also for India's growing dairy and poultry industries. Still, one critical question lingered: why Burkina Faso? Why not turn to larger, more established exporters? The answer lay in political and economic calculations. Burkina Faso had options. Many buyers from Asia, the Middle East, and Europe were interested. But India offered three key advantages: fair terms, not only direct payments, but also infrastructure upgrades, irrigation projects, and technical training to improve yields. Equal partnership. India presented itself as a cooperative partner, not as a political patron demanding concessions. History of trust over the past decade. Smaller trade agreements in textiles, pharmaceuticals, and machinery had already established goodwill between the two nations. For Burkina Faso, this deal was not simply about selling crops. It was about repositioning itself in the global economy as a reliable agricultural hub, not merely a source of raw materials. The global response was immediate. In West Africa, neighbors saw inspiration. If Burkina Faso could secure such a transformative deal, then large-scale agricultural exports from the region were indeed possible. Many nations began exploring similar upgrades to their own systems. But in South America and Eastern Europe, the mood was different. For them, Burkina Faso's entry into large-scale grain exports posed a direct challenge to their Asian market share. Analysts predicted price cuts and competitive adjustments. Meanwhile, international food security organizations welcomed the diversification. By spreading production across multiple climate zones, the risks of simultaneous shortages were reduced. Display rotating globe animation highlighting Africa, Asia, and South America. Still, behind all the optimism, one concern remained: could Burkina Faso really sustain such massive exports without threatening its own food supply? This was the most delicate issue: the balance between global ambition and domestic stability. The Burkinabe government's solution had two parts. First, they pledged to reserve a fixed percentage of national grain production for domestic consumption, no matter the global demand. And secondly, They committed to using part of the revenue to subsidize local food prices and invest in expanded irrigation, boosting production for both domestic and export markets. Skeptics, however, warn that global demand pressures can be unpredictable. If international prices surged, exporters might be tempted to divert supplies away from local markets. This is where India's infrastructure investments became vital. By supporting modern storage facilities and farmer training programs, the aim was to increase yields enough to feed both Burkina Faso's people and India's markets. Whether Burkina Faso can successfully maintain this balance will be revealed in time. Yet one thing is already clear. This deal has changed the way the world perceives the country, from quiet diplomatic meetings to headlines shaking global commodity markets. The $14 billion maize and sorghum agreement represents more than a transaction. It is a symbol of transformation. It proves that emerging nations can step forward with vision and strategy, that food security is as much about diplomacy as it is about rainfall, and that geography, whether landlocked or coastal, no longer dictates destiny in a globalized world. Bustling Indian markets, Burkina farmlands, cargo ships crossing oceans. For Burkina Faso, this deal is a declaration. The nation will no longer be seen only through the lens of gold and cotton, but as a powerful new player in the global grain trade. For India, it is a calculated move to secure the future, protect its people, and ensure stability in an unpredictable climate. And for the rest of the world, it is a reminder of how deeply interconnected we all are, because in today's markets, a deal signed in a landlocked nation in West Africa can ripple across oceans, touch global prices, and shape the meals on dinner tables for billions. Time will decide how far Burkina Faso will go. But one thing is clear: Captain Ibrahim Traoré has already proven that with visionary leadership, no nation is doomed to remain behind. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps bring more stories of transformation, hope, and resilience to the world and tells about African light.